Hi, today we are talking about how wounds and past trauma can prevent us from fully growing into the desire we have for success and growth in our lives, and especially in our careers and in leadership roles. And today I have a special guest, and her name is Rhonda. And I'm just going to read her bio because it's pretty spectacular. So you'll have to forgive me for looking down. But Rhonda Skallan is not your typical leadership coach. She's the founder of Spark Alchemy, a transformational space where women unravel the hidden weight of trauma and ignite their most powerful, authentic leadership. With over 2 decades of experience leading over 6 billion in healthcare and technology construction portfolios, and Rhonda brings a rare fusion of boardroom grit, intuitive fire, and deep emotional intelligence. Rhonda now works with ambitious women who are ready to reclaim their voice and rise in authentic leadership. I love that. She sees beneath the surface, cuts through the noise, and helps women reclaim the part of themselves that they've been taught to hide. Her work is for those who are successful on paper but secretly exhausted, stuck, or playing small. Through her lead weight, is it lead weight?
Lead weight.
Assessment, yep, Radiance Mastermind, and trauma-informed coaching, Rhonda guides women to release the weight they were never meant to carry and rise. So welcome, Rhonda.
Thank
And
you. Thank
I'm
you.
Erica, and I'm your host of Power by Joy podcast. And this is a place where we talk about similar topics about, like, if you're feeling stuck, like you don't have the ability to make change in your life, or you're bored or frustrated and just know you need to make change and you want more joy, play, adventure, and fulfillment in your life. We talk about these topics on this podcast. So you're in the right place if those are things you're curious about. So, Rhonda, I'm super excited because I just think you are working in a much needed niche. And so I would love it if you would just share a little bit about, like, share your story about what brought you to this work.
Well, so grateful to be here. Thank you, Erica, for having me. Very excited to be on this podcast. Yeah, thanks. So my story, well, I grew up in chaos. I mean, as a child, there was a lot of changes going on. And starting when I was 9, I was sexually abused for 6 years. And I carried that silently. And that was something that was quietly in the underground while I was working and being highly successful on the outside. I had a lot of drive to succeed, and I often say to especially child sex abuse survivors, which I'll refer to as CSA, that because of what we survived, we do have a lot of drive because success was our only option. You know, if you weren't succeeding, you were just not going to even be able to exist. So that drive to succeed came by pretty naturally, and then eventually I started going to therapy when I was about 19. Really started learning a lot about myself and really started to ask a lot of self-reflective questions. So been doing therapy work for 37 years, and that gives me a lot of that ability to do internal work and external work. Started working with coaches. I figured this out this morning, 23 years ago. And the two together really allowed for me to move into the space I am now, where it is about helping women who have gone through something, any kind of trauma counts, and not ignore who we are, not ignore our bodies, not ignore our self internal voices, not ignore those things so that we could just perform. And across my career, I've worked in 6 industries: entertainment, healthcare, education, finance, tech, and construction. And I always say those are all male dominated industries. And then I say, hint, hint, they're all male dominated industries. So helping women in male dominated industries means helping women. So really, if people are feeling stuck and things like that, so the way I got here was through my own experiences, my own growth. Started coaching in 2007 and have continued to grow in that part of my life.
That's amazing. Your experience helps you to really probably deeply understand the struggles that especially women can face in the workplace. And uh, I even find this even in play and in hobbies that I participate in. I have some hobbies that are definitely more masculine, and just even in play, you can come across that stuff. So it's very interesting how you see and come across that in a lot of areas in our lives.
And
So,
I think too, especially if you start seeing yourself as a people pleaser, that's something that we usually get from trauma. Perfectionism is something, and it's not that we don't have these in some levels. Lots of us have them without trauma, but I think that there's more levels of people pleasing and perfectionism and overworking and not being able to set boundaries in a way that tells us that there was some trauma that's leaking in.
yeah. Well, that leads to my next question, which was, does unhealed trauma and wounds like affect all of our areas of our life, or just usually show up more in one area?
So trauma does not stay in one lane. It does it is like, nope, that's not how I work. It leaks into relationships, leadership, health, our sense of worth. It it will it has no sense of staying in one place. And I often say, I tried to kick trauma out of the car. So trauma kept trying to drive the car, and I kept trying to kick trauma out of the car. Finally, what I realized is trauma's not leaving. So maybe I can stick trauma in the back seat and say, don't touch the radio, don't touch the controls. You can be in the back seat, but you got to stay in your seat. Well, I'd wake up and all of a sudden I'd have trauma back in the driver's seat. And I was like, wow, Chinese fire drill, got to take back over. Trauma wants to, a lot of the things that come out of trauma are to protect ourselves. The human brain, we are very smart, very self protective creatures. And so what happens is it's about survival. And so sometimes what it thinks is surviving, though, is running from a saber-toothed tiger. And in today's society, that's not what survival is. So that letting trauma lead can become a cage, that stability can become a cage. And so we want to do that healing work so that we're moving from surviving to thriving and understanding that it's in all lanes of our life.
Mm, I like the way you phrase that, because I've never heard of like that it doesn't stay in one lane. I always joke that little Erica is driving the bus instead of a car. And I'm like, oh, she's trying to drive the bus again.
And that's when we literally, it's almost like, stop, I need to have a Chinese fire drill because I need to recognize, little Rhonda's driving, or trauma Rhonda's driving, or even passion Rhonda can be driving and she can be quite her own interesting self. Who needs to be driving the car, and then who can be, the passengers on the bus? And then, stop, Chinese fire drill, let me get back in the driver's seat and you guys can all contribute. But I should probably be in the driver's seat.
In regards to like how it's showing up, what are maybe some of the most common ways you see it showing up in your clients' lives? Like
I think a
living
lot of the
with your,
ways, yeah, a lot of the ways trauma shows up is when you say yes, when you want to say no, or you mean to say no. So that's a big one. Another way is when you're over preparing, like you're trying to make sure you've got every single angle covered and you're really over preparing for everything, especially because we are experts in what we do, and learning to trust ourselves is really key. So when you're over preparing, that's a flag for me. Avoiding conflict at all costs. That's another one where it's like, I don't want to have conflict. People pleasing, peacemaker, those things. And then kind of a unique one is staying really busy so that you're outrunning your own ability to be with stillness. So you stay so busy that you don't actually spend some time with downtime. Like, and if you're not busy with work, you're watching TV or you're playing games or you're planning a cocktail party, or you're just so busy that you don't have that time to fill your own cup. That's unhealed trauma generally.
wow. Um, I can definitely hear each of those and see how I've moved through a lot of those. I can think back early in my real estate career, how I would spend hours preparing for my appointments and like deeply researching every single property so that if they just happened to ask me a question about the septic, I would know. Like super over prepared. And I remember the person I was in the same office with, she just print her stuff and walk out, and I'm like, what is she doing? And then as I grew more confident and had been doing some coaching and healing, I learned how to show up and handle if I didn't have the answer. Like it just was, but I can see how, oh, yep, I can even see that in other areas of my life. So I love that I can see, I'm like, yay, I'm growing up.
Well, and one of the things, if as women, we're often raised to be responsible. I mean, I think about, I have two sisters and two brothers, and the brothers get away with a lot more than the sisters did. And I think that, it's, well, they're a boy, and it's like, wait, so women are commonly raised to be that rock responsible one. And then we take that into our, adult space also. And then it's like, oh, and then we take it into our work and into our family, and we're the ones that everybody turns to. And that's exhausting.
Yeah, and I think I only had boys, so I can't really compare. But I mean, I am a girl, but I just think about how I think we do tend to encourage them to charge forward with whatever they're,
Mhm.
you know, desiring. We're not like, well, let's think. I mean, of course, we want to teach them responsibility, but okay, so you gave me some really good examples there. Can you talk about like trauma? Like, does like we'll call this big trauma? You hear big T and little T. Like, does big trauma or does little trauma, does little trauma affect us too? And like, how so? Can you talk a little bit to like the difference between big trauma and little trauma?
So generally, trauma is kind of like death by a thousand paper cuts. So little traumas can be the thousand paper cuts where it's still just as harmful in the long run. Small betrayals, microaggressions, silencing, invalidations that just keep building up over time, especially when things aren't acknowledged. In some ways, people think, oh, well, a big trauma, you can just deal with it. So, really, even big traumas have a lot of little traumas under them. So, I know people say the big T and the little t, but I find that trauma in general is just thousands of paper cuts, and it's just like, ow, ow, ow. And that unspoken weight gets really buried deep, so we don't even realize what it's costing us because we just keep dealing with all these little pieces and parts that keep contributing. So if you had a big trauma event, then all these little other pieces just kind of cut on that. And if you didn't have a big trauma event, you still have all these little parts and pieces causing you traumas. And I would say post COVID, that was huge for everybody in our society. So I don't really see many people now without trauma. And statistically, what you'll hear from national health associations and things like that is 1 in 2 women have trauma in their background. 1 in 4 women have child sex abuse in their background. 1 in 2
I'm
have
just getting
other trauma.
one, two. I'm getting chills everywhere to think about that. That's just incredible. Whew, that's a lot of healing that is out there, that we need to all be thinking about when we meet other people where they're at, like that we all
Mhm.
have, like pretty much all of us have it that
Pretty
like
much
that.
all of us have it. And what I think is interesting is when you think about the cost of trauma. So in industry, it's costing billions of dollars that we're not addressing trauma. But on an individual level, it's easily costing women over $1 million each because
Mm,
we're not able to make as much money as men. I actually was listening to a podcast that was talking about when women retire, how much less their retirement is in comparison to a man's, because women took off years to have children, or women never made as much as men. All these things add up in your portfolio over time. So by the time you retire, you're $1 million behind. And you're like, wait a minute, I worked just as hard, but because of the formulas and things like that. So that's one way that it's costing us money. The other way it's costing us money is how much we're paying in therapy, or how much we're paying in taking time off of work. There's all these
Medical
different things,
bills, health.
medical bills, all these things are costing us as trauma survivors easily $1 million over our lifetime. And it's like, wait a minute, why isn't this being addressed? Why aren't we raising our hand and saying, hello, hold on a second?
Wow. Yeah. That when you put it in like a financial perspective, that's also, I don't know how many of us sit and think about the fact that there's that cost as well. It's not just emotional costs. It's not just our physical health costs,
Right,
that it's even in our pocketbooks when we don't think about that kind of stuff. So it's really, I mean, if you think about how it costs in each area of our lives,
right,
and you were to sit down and kind of like put that in like numbers, I feel like it would be really obvious how important it is to invest in this healing and wound, dealing with trauma. Like that should be like an absolute investment in our lives, just the same as investing in going to the gym
mm-hmm,
or going to therapy. That is for your physical, like, you hurt your knee or whatever, but there's all these other things we're doing, but like specifically going to like look at and heal trauma. Wow. Oof.
and I would think
Well,
that companies would start to understand that the billions of dollars it costs industry by not addressing trauma is also pretty intense, because people who they leave the workforce entirely, turnover rates, all those types of things cost a lot of money in industry. And you're like, why aren't companies paying attention and saying, you know what, we need to step back and look at trauma? They will step back and put things in some boxes. And so, we do have what we're dealing with in the DEI space, what we're dealing with in these different spaces. But really, if you go upstream, that's all dealing with trauma. So instead of trying to box it down, let's move upstream and say, wait a minute, really what we need to address is trauma, period.
mm, amen.
Yeah,
Everybody, you got a lot more happy, productive, clear, focused minds when people aren't stuck in that mud
right. Hmm.
of pain and trauma. So when I think about that, we talked a little bit about how like people, it seems like we oftentimes will judge the size of our trauma. So you're talking about a million paper cuts versus someone who's maybe gone through domestic violence or CSA. Do you find that people judge that and then think, oh, well, I don't really have anything to complain about?
Yes, I do see that a lot. People want to play that comparison game. And I think I think that's part of our society, what's pushed on us. Others had it worse. I should be fine. I remember as a kid, people being like, you think you have it bad? Go look at the child in the wheelchair or the child with cancer. And you're like, how is that really helpful? So, especially for high functioning women, it's like, well, let me find reasons to figure out why I really actually have it good. And healing is not a comparison game. I mean, even if you think of cancer healing, different people heal different ways. It's not a comparison game. And your nervous system doesn't care how it looks on paper. Your nervous system is responding to pain. And if the pain is you have trauma from a car accident or you have trauma from CSA, you still have pain and you need to deal with that pain. And it's not about so and so had it worse. It's this pain is actually holding me back. So, how do I start dealing with the impacts from the pain and not worry so much about other people's pain?
Hmm, yeah, I we all have it. So okay, a little compassion and grace for space there, but yeah, looking within instead
Well,
and
all
of
trauma
comparing.
deserves space, right? It's
Right.
it's all of it. It's not to be
Mm-hmm.
minimized or compared. It's to honor what happened to you, and that will
Mm-hmm.
help you move forward, both safety and powerfully. There's
Mm-hmm.
CSA involves, so there's CSA that could happen one or two incidences where, something happened in a school or a church. And then there's also CSA that can happen. So my CSA was 6 years long, almost every day, with my stepfather. And so, there's a lot that goes on, but in both cases, there's betrayal. There's this identity level impact and grooming that happens. So you can't say that we're not affected the same or that we're affected differently. What you have to understand is there's all this space that needs to be had to honor the trauma that you experienced.
And the emotions that it brought forward as
Mm-hmm.
well. I can think of how I recently had an experience at Super Fresh where I was like, oh, that was actually a bit traumatic, and it made me like have to work through feeling safe and like you know, just trusting. And there it still brought up like some of the same kind of things that go along with other experiences I've had. And I thought, oh, it was interesting to go, oh, that even though I was completely safe, and it still like fired some stuff up in me that I was like, ooh, that was definitely, that was a trauma, and allow myself to label it that and go, oh, okay, that was not a normal experience. And it brought up a lot of feelings, and I get to have them all. And I felt them and acknowledged how it made me feel. And then also acknowledged that, well, in fact, I am safe. Nobody hurt me, and no one has the ability to affect how I feel about things. That's my own power. It was like, oh, okay, like, yeah, it was okay. I don't know, it felt good to say, you know what, that was a traumatic experience. Like,
Mm-hmm.
that's not normal. People shouldn't behave that way towards each other, and it's okay to acknowledge that that's what it was. And I was like, ah, I think in the past I have felt like, oh, that was just a bad thing, but not going labeling it what it really was. So I think there's power in even just giving yourself to acknowledge that that's what happened to you, like even when it's small
And you need to
things.
believe in yourself. And I think the other thing is when you're trying to be compassionate, even with others who've experienced trauma, the first step is to believe them. You don't, people don't need to give you proof of trauma. I share my story so that people do understand that I have a lot of experience with trauma informed coaching. And then I also, have a lot of experience managing billions of dollars and being a pretty much badass in the corporate world so that people
Yeah.
know I'm a resource they can use. I don't try to tell my story as proof. I tell my story to make people have a safe and secure space. But the first key is to believe people. If they need compassion, give it to them. Don't ask people for proof. Just sit with them and support them and let them share what they need to share. And I think a lot of us, I think we talk about this in my group therapy sometimes. The sharing of your trauma, like, oh well, let's talk about your trauma. We don't do this in my group, but we talk about in places in the world where it's like, well, here was my trauma. What was your trauma? And it's not a comparison game. We're all individuals. We're all dealing with things different, and we all deserve that honor of this happened to me and this is how I feel. And I'm glad it didn't happen to you, or I'm glad because if you think about even at work, when one woman is treated this way and another woman is treated this way, we both may react differently. Or in your personal life, breaking up with a boy, some people, it's like, oh, that was really big. And some people are like, ah, I was a week away from getting rid of him. So we're all going through our own journeys, but to honor that journey and to honor that experience and to truly believe people when they're going through something and listen. We don't need to fix people either. We need to listen and support people and care for them and honor them.
Yeah, I feel like a huge theme that has been coming up for me in the last couple of weeks, just in things I'm hearing and learning, reading, experiencing myself, is like that really we all just want to feel like seen and heard. You don't even have to agree with me. I just want to know that you respect me enough to hear me, or care about me
Mm.
enough to just hear me, hear what I'm saying, see me so that you hear me, kind of a thing. And I think that maybe that's not valued enough, that like that can be the gift you give somebody, is just hearing them and giving them space to share their story so they feel heard by somebody, because what if they've not had that space with anybody before? So we can give that to each other a little bit more. I think that would be powerful and healing.
Well, and the human connection is so very important. And with social media and then COVID, we definitely saw some impacts of diminishing human connection, human to human connection. And,
Mhm.
now what we're hearing a lot is even with the AI piece, people are leaning on AI for a connection. And it's like, we need to remember that humans need human connection. That is part of the human condition. That's not us making something up. We do better when we're with other people. That's, there's tons of studies that show married people live longer, people with
Mhm.
partners live longer. That's not made up stuff. And
Yeah.
so understanding the importance of having connection and being heard, being seen, being able to hug somebody if that's what you want. That's all really important stuff that society is starting to look at again and go, oh, wait, we pulled way far away and wait, we saw some damage done by that. We need to come back in now.
Yeah. I think there's definitely a need for us to connect again. There's that collective. There's that like I just read this morning about like we don't heal alone. Healing doesn't just yes, there's things that can happen between yourself, and a higher power that you believe in, but also that healing happens through interaction with other people and that
Hmm.
connect, that human connection. And I mean, they talk about people that like even just have someone come visit them, like the babies, like
Yeah.
when they have that touch, like like you said, we're so wired to do better when we're in connection with other humans, or I say pets
Animals
too,
too.
like yeah, animals too.
Hmm.
And they're very powerful because I think we've got that energy and that connection that is so powerful. Um, I would love it if you'd share a little bit. Do you feel like non-CSA trauma is different from CSA trauma, and like, or does it show up differently in people's lives or affect
So
them
the
a little
one thing I would
differently?
say that, I think is a bit different about CSA versus non-CSA is the CSA, the word child is how it can show up differently because there's identity level impacts when you're starting to abuse children. So children are not, they're not grown up. They don't know who they are. They're learning how to trust. They're learning how who they are. They're learning all these things. And when you have abuse in those younger ages, you're taking away the childhood piece. So there's pieces, around abandonment, belonging, physical touch. All those things are a little different. But that doesn't, it's not that one's bigger, worse, anything like that. It's just when you think about children and you think about the abuse children are receiving, it is impacting more at an identity level and a developmental level. Where when adults experience some type of trauma, it's pushing usually on different buttons because a 30-year-old has already, kind of defined who they are in their life. They know their identity, their sense of belonging, things like that may be more identified. And so children who are abused can actually struggle with some of these things across their lives. It's harder to get, it's harder to find that sense of belonging. It's harder to figure out your identity. And adult abuse, adult trauma survivors, usually there's a baseline that we can look at. How do we get back to that? Do you want to get back to that? Do you want to change that? Do you care about that? Instead of, okay, you never had that. Does that make sense?
Totally does, and that's actually really good insight to have. Um, I've never thought about that difference there before, so very insightful to think about that. That's kind of disrupting a child's initial launch. It's like somebody pulls back the bowstring and then goes clip,
Right.
and it's like, so, where am I going?
Yeah.
Kind of thing. So I can
That's a really
totally
great
see that.
analogy. It's literally like, I mean, it's its own weird failure to launch, like pulled back and then, oh, you didn't get these things that are normal expectations. And then when you think about in society, adults who don't have a childhood experience, they're like, well, what do you mean you don't understand this? Because they don't necessarily get Well, you didn't get that growing up, so you don't have it as an adult.
Yeah, you don't, you're missing that piece of the puzzle. Yeah, yeah, that's crazy. Okay, so I just want to check my list here. Um, we've already kind of touched on this, but how do you think that we as community or as fellow people can show up better for others that are experiencing trauma or have recently experienced trauma or even just have trauma that they haven't really worked through and you can really see it is something they're struggling with?
So obviously, if you really see somebody in heavy trauma, I always think referring somebody to therapy is a good way to go. I think one thing is don't try to solve the problem, especially if they're in therapy. So one of the things that's interesting is if they're disclosing their trauma in a healthy manner, they're not asking you to solve their problem. They're disclosing in a healthy manner. So I think a lot of times we're like, oh, let me solve that for you. It's like, whoa, I'm not asking you to solve it. I'm just sharing information because I have the resources to solve it. I have therapists, I have coaches, I'm, working with my doctor, whatever that looks like. So I would say, don't try to solve problems. You can ask questions, or you definitely acknowledge, I'm sorry that happened to you. Is there anything, you need from me? But believe them and just show care and compassion.
That listening and just listening. I like that a good reminder to not be just trying to throw solutions at something when they're not asking. I guess it would be wait for the invitation
Hmm.
if they're seeking resources. Okay, so what areas of our life are affected by us not doing the healing work and trauma? Like, do you feel like it shows up in our health more, or like if we're not doing that work and we're just refusing to acknowledge it, what do you think that looks like?
Well, I definitely think so. Physically, you could have fatigue. I think digestive issues. So the gut
Mm,
brain's a real thing. So you've got, your intellectual brain and your gut brain and all this in between. So if you're not doing healing work, digestive issues could be a big part of that. Fatigue, tension headaches, tight muscles. So those are some physical areas. And then in the emotional world, you could have anxiety, which has become pretty prevalent. Another couple things you could have is anger, rage. You could also have some numbness or disassociation. You could be one of those people that's constantly doing something so that you're not dealing with what's going on. You're disassociating from everything, whether it be working out all the time. I mean, there's tons of addictions out there. Some are healthy, some are not. But that numbness, that's often an emotional sign that you have healing work to do. And then there's also, spiritual on whatever level you want to be with whatever higher power, but this a lack of purpose, not knowing your why, feeling like, why am I here? Feeling disconnected from other people, not feeling like you belong, feeling invisible, those types of things. Those are some other areas where it's like if you're seeing that or if you're feeling that, you probably have some healing work to do because you can start addressing those things and those are just they're signs that things aren't right. They're not necessarily reality. Fear is false evidence appearing real, and we often don't understand that what we think is it's a thought. It may or may not be real. We need to actually do some research and figure that out. And same thing with feelings.
yeah, the I have definitely had to learn that like really truly understanding the difference of that my feelings or first thoughts about something are not who I am, those aren't me. Like trying to like really separate myself from those has been a long learning process because I've really identified with being someone who's really in their feelings. And like sometimes it felt like a curse and sometimes it felt like a blessing, but realizing like, oh, those are my feelings, but I can actually choose to assign different feelings and pause and assign a new meaning to this uh, situation. Makes me feel very powerful, first of all, because then I'm like, oh, like, is this affecting me in this moment? Like, whatever I did, let's say I just heard some than about someone down the street or something,
Mhm.
like, is that affecting my, like, in this moment? Is it? No? Okay. In reality, is that really something that I have to be worried about? Or maybe it'll play out different than I think, does it have to mean that? And, oh, okay, maybe not. Let's just see, like, let's just let it be and watch it develop. But that has given me a huge ability to go, okay, I don't have to put so much emotion and energy and feelings towards something and like make this whole story in my head of how this is going to turn out. I've spent a lot of years wasting time and energy and emotions doing that. And it's amazing how just pausing, going, wait a minute, is this just my feelings or is this like, is this a reality? Like, what is this? And having to learn to check in with myself has definitely become a regular practice and trying to figure that out. And of course, I'm not, I don't have that mastered, but
Well, I
it's
think,
definitely helped.
yeah, and I think feelings are, I call it the roller coaster. If you're feeling something, you're on a roller coaster, and if you can ask yourself to write it for 90 seconds, just sit with the feeling, get to the other side, because usually what we do is we feel a feeling and we're like, nope, don't want to feel that, nope, don't want to do that, nope. Where instead of like, okay, let me just feel it till it stops. And feelings will last about 90 seconds. They literally will go about that long, but sitting in that 90 seconds feels like an eternity.
Mm-hmm.
And especially if it's a feeling of fear or loneliness or anxiety, there's different ones that you're literally like, I don't, this is too uncomfortable. And if you can just hold on to that discomfort, you can get to the other side of it, and try not to make decisions from it and try not to squish it down. Another thing I say is, and I'm wondering if this is true for you, once nighttime falls and it's dark out, the things that my brain comes up with, the fears, the anxieties, in the dark, wake up at 1 in the morning, do I think those same things by the light of day? Because I
Mm.
generally, at night is when the big bad things come out. It's like when you hear the bump and you're like, what was that?
Yeah. Well, I can say for me, that varies actually. I think a lot of times I'm not experiencing that, but then I have just come through some high stress things that lasted weeks. And I was waking up in the 4 o'clock hour every single night thinking about that stuff and having fear, stress,
Mm-hmm.
anger, and oh, I just want to, what if this? And that has come to almost complete closure. And I have slept so I didn't actually sleep hard right after. That's when I woke up and was like, I think this was a little bit of trauma, Erica. So I let myself spend an entire day feeling all my feelings, like just all my feelings. And I just really took it easy and I let them like I didn't sit in like one emotion all day, but like I would do other things, but like when something came up, I would like pause and let myself feel it. And I was like, okay, okay, I'm okay now. All right, I'm still fine in this moment. And so the last 2 nights I have slept really hard. So it's very fascinating because now that that's passing and I think I let myself process it and did all the things that used my tools, um, I'm sleeping again. So I was like, oh, amen.
But I do think for people to think if they're waking up and
Hmm.
it's not every night, but if you're waking up and all of a sudden your brain's running and you're like, oh my gosh, and everything's bigger, that's actually pretty normal at night. First off, we don't have the resources to go talk to somebody. I mean, you could wake up your spouse, but mine would be like, ugh. So generally speaking, there's not as many resources when you wake in the dark at night. That's just not when things happen. So that's when things can feel bigger than they
Hmm.
are. So just remind yourself if you wake up and you're like, oh, this is a lot of stress and things like that. Part of it is it's the dark hours.
Hmm. Yeah. Well, you've already answered my next question, so I'm going to skip that one about signs. You gave me some really good specifics about like emotional, spiritual, and you touched on all three of them. So you just tuned into my tuned into me here. We just were talking about it a little bit, but what are some of the tools you use with your clients to help them kind of get started on this process?
So, all of my clients, I actually help them. Part of where I start is the I am, really understanding who you are and who you are authentically. And so, I have an emergenetics assessment, which is an assessment where you take this quiz with like 100 questions and it comes back and tells you your thinking preferences and your behavioral preferences. And what I do is I pair that with a natal astrology reading. And a lot of people are like, oh, astrology. But the minute you get both of these, one you actually answered questions on, one based on this point in time when you were born, you start to see, oh, wait a minute. This is like there this is who I am. These are my strengths. This is what I do, and I really focus on who are you authentically and what strengths do you have so that you can stop trying to ignore those and some people like to focus on weaknesses, things like that. I'll also use strength finders, but really helping people understand who they are authentically. So I do use astrology in my practice. And the other thing I use, once I've worked with people on getting to know who they are, I use oracle cards or tarot cards to help with some intuitive reflection tools. I depend a lot on intuition. I depend a lot on my own experiences and how I've gotten to where I am and how to trust what my intuition's telling me when I'm helping one of my clients. A lot of somatic work, what works in your body, giving people practices to do so that they can move things through their body, journaling, meditation. And then a big thing for me is affirmations. I think that affirmations can be really important. Most of my clients, I give them these shower affirmation cards. And so they can put an affirmation up in their shower and leave it up during the day and look at it. And then that's something big for me. And mirror work is another one. Learning to talk to yourself in the mirror. That is some hard work and can make some big differences. So those are some of the tools that I use. There's others, but those are probably some of the high level generic ones that.
Yeah. Well, I love that you are using such a different you're not just coming at it from like your corporate experience. You're like using this whole other, you're using all of your gifts and experiences, and so it feels like you're touching on it or maybe viewing it from so many different lenses that maybe not everybody has the ability to come in and see someone, a client, through. um, it feels like a special gift for you. Obviously we all have our special gifts, but I think it's amazing that you're helping people to really focus on that I am. And that's something I love, that there's so many synchronicities going on because I've just been like reading this book, The Sophia Code, and there's
Ah,
all this stuff
yes.
about the I am in there. So I'm like, I love that she's talking about the I am.
And my
uh,
my framework, my first 8 weeks is I am, and it's learning who you are. My next 8 weeks is I am whole, and that's learning some of the techniques and tools and things to keep your somatics where you need to be. And then my third week is I am powerful. So I continue to use the I am framework to really help women embody that I amness that we need to.
Yeah, I love this so much. I think that for me, I have an episode talking about getting to know yourself, and then also one about like the benefits or signs of knowing that you know who you are. And I think there's so many people out there, especially women, that don't really feel like, if I came to you, because I asked this on an episode, I said, if I came to you and I asked you to introduce yourself and tell me about you, but you can't talk about your career, you can't talk about your family, like none of that. You just need to tell me about you. I find that most people are like, they don't, it's very uncomfortable for most. And I met you at a women's retreat, and I shared this with the group that I found it fascinating that when we step into this, there was there 15 of us, I think,
Yeah, total.
14 around there. And I noticed right away that that was not what was happening when we were all introducing ourselves to each other. That uh, wasn't like the leading conversation of how we showed each other who we were. And I was like, this is so cool. I've never seen women do that. Like, I made it pretty far into the retreat, not knowing if people were married or had kids. And I think that's powerful for women to be able to show up and hang out and like relate as just themselves. We get such rare opportunities to do that and just be me, just be Erica. You just get to be Rhonda. Like, we need that. And
Hmm.
how do you do that if you've never taken the time to discover who you are? Who is that I am? And I love, so my episode where I talked about getting to know yourself was about like, I love using these tools like astrology, like seeing my birth chart, using human design, learning about gene keys, but also doing personality tests like emergent genetics,
Emergence.
or there's so many different ones out there that are available to people, and you can go through them with like a coach or somebody. But I think when you really like start to get a sense of who you are by seeing, oh my gosh, like, yes, here's my personality test that says, oh, I'm a thinker, processor, da 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 da. And then you've got this astrology, and you have this snapshot of this life plan according to when you were born. When I went to that retreat, they like showed me, I was like, I knew, but like seeing on paper, like how I had lived out at that point almost 50 years, like exactly how the timelines were. I was like, oh my gosh, I'm living out my life exactly how I was supposed to according to my birth, like my astrology chart. Like, what? And it's somehow really affirming that like I can't mess it up. I'm doing a good job being me, you know? So I love you using these tools.
And I agree with you. I mean, it's interesting because, I love personality tests. I can't get enough of them myself either. But what
Hmm.
I've learned is I am strategic. And I don't know that I would have told people I was strategic before because I didn't understand it. But I'm a visionary. I actually like to think big and brainstorm and think about the future. And I really do like and then you're like, oh, and in doing that, I like to help people and I like to help women. And then you're like, oh, and I like to have impact. Oh, and I have a Scorpio rising, so I like to disrupt things. Oh, yeah, so I'm a disruptor who thinks about big picture things and I disrupt things to make it happen. So that's the kind of space I want to get people into so that they're really able to embrace these pieces of themselves because, yeah, I mean, I love when you have an icebreaker, an event, or introducing yourself, and you're like, "Yeah, I'm married with, a blah 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 kids. This is what I do. This is my job. Oh, hi, my name's Rhonda, and I do that." I can't do it anymore. I actually want to like put on my name tag. My name's Rhonda, and I'm a Scorpio, or I'm a rare, Scorpio rising, whatever, or something like. My name's Rhonda, and I'm a disruptor. I don't want to tell people anymore, oh, I'm a program manager. Oh, I'm a coach. I don't even like to call myself a coach because I feel like I'm more of a guide.
Hmm.
But it's
No.
interesting. I agree with you 100%. It's like, who are you without your titles, without your the identity
Accomplishments.
that social society has given us?
Yeah, I that's who I like to get to know. So like when I meet people, like, and I'm trying to talk to them, like I want to find that out. Like, who are you? Like, what do you love? What lights you up? What are you passionate about? What if, those are the things I love to find out about people. My sun sign is Scorpio, so I'm not surprised. We have some very similar
I have
thought
a Scorpio
process.
rising. I have an Aries
Okay.
sun, which is very I am, by the way.
Okay. Which is why, so we just came into the Aries, right? So this makes,
We have a lot of
and
Aries energy, especially Neptune moved into Aries for the first time in many years.
yeah.
Saturn just moved into Aries. We're getting ready for Jupiter to move into Cancer, which I think is supposed to be very auspicious this year. So it's
Hmm.
been there's a lot of transformations going on in the astrology world. There's the big planets, the farther outer planets are all changing signs for the first time in years.
Yeah, a long time. And I think we're feeling a lot of change. Everybody's feeling these big changes right now
Transformations. Mhm.
and transformation and just feeling called to healing and connecting with other people and like starting to go, okay, I don't feel right or I need something, I'm missing something. And I think that people are starting to really search differently and understanding that there's this spiritual piece of it missing where we're just wanting to connect on that level with other people,
Mhm.
not just talk about how things are going and this is how my week, that surface stuff. So I think that's probably also Scorpio in us that we're like, no, give me the deets. I want the real. How are you? So when someone texts me and they're like, "Hey, just wanted to say hi. How are you?" I'm like, "Well, you asked," and I'll answer back because I'm like, well, "Let's get an actual conversation going." Because if I say I'm doing good, they're like, "Oh, that's great," and I'm like, "How are you?" I'm good. I know nothing. I know nothing about how you're actually doing. So I will text back and be like, "Well, this week this and this," and it'll be high level, but I'll be genuine and be
Mhm.
like, and what's going on with you? And then it's like, oh, well, she just actually gave me a real answer. So then they tend to give me a real answer back.
I
Because
tend to do
I
the
like,
same thing. They're like,
yeah, I'm
"Oh,
like,
how's it going?" Well, here's how's it going. I don't usually write back, "Oh, things are good," or "Oh, fine."
no,
What is that? If I say
that's
that, it
just
means I don't want to talk to you.
pretty much, that's how I receive it when someone says it. I'm like, hey, I'm genuinely checking in on you.
Yeah.
Oh, I love it. Well, that's obviously our desire to connect in a real way. You talked about tools, and I just wanted to say, what have you know or find out like when you think about the clients you've worked with, and they've been like daring to rise, daring to do that healing work, and they're owning that worthiness. What have you noticed in their lives? Like, what differences have you seen in them?
Well, one of my pet peeves that I try to get women to stop right away is to stop apologizing. I love when you hold the door for somebody and you're like, "Oh, sorry. Why are you apologizing for holding the door for somebody?" So stop the apologizing. Generally, get them to do that. Honestly, they make more money and they start claiming the space that's theirs. They stop settling. And one of the things that I've started to recognize, women have been working in the workforce for about 80, 90 years now. During World War II, women really came big time into the workforce, but the workforce is driven by the patriarchy. It's driven by the masculine energy of competitiveness, of ambition, of testosterone, of cortisol. And having this lifestyle, they're starting to discover that about 80% of women are having health issues around autoimmune issues because we've been working in a way that doesn't match what our body wants. So we are not meant to be competitive workers. We are not meant to be eight to hustling and grinding and that type of stuff. That really doesn't work for us the same way that it does for men because we're not in the competitive space in our reptilian brains. That's just, we're more driven by estrogen. So I think understanding what I see women do is start to understand how they work and how to maximize their energy, how to maximize it with the hormone cycle, how to maximize it with the planets and what they're doing in the day of the week, and how to, oh, Mondays, you know what? That's not my good day to do this. I'm not going to sign up to do that. Learning how to say no, those types of things. That's really what I start to see when women rise, is they start to embrace their life in a way that moves their life forward to an embodied lifestyle of who they are and who they authentically are. And so they go from this quiet following, being loyal to this way that's not working to them, to really moving into gold and really being able to alchemize and live the life that they're meant to live.
Mm. I had full body chills when you started talking about this. I think that I'm feeling really passionate about that particular part of it right now. I see the phoenix rising kind of thing. I was in real estate for a really long time and very masculine world just in how everything's structured, contracts, business, competition, hustle, hustle, hustle. And I felt this calling to start stepping back. And it was scary, first of all, but also like I was having a lot of challenges around my body and
Hmm.
pain and just not feeling well. Same thing. I have so many women in my age-ish that yes, we're not only dealing with kind of, I feel that most of us that as we approach menopause and like perimenopause, I don't think it's an accident that those hormones change and all of a sudden we start to feel like fuck you. Like, I'm done people pleasing. I don't like this. I'm not happy anymore. What about me and what I want in my dreams? And it's not a coincidence that all of that time we start to want to change and we want to seek answers. We want to have more joy in our lives. And like, and sometimes we don't even know what that is. We don't even know what we're craving. I think there's been such a disconnect. So I'm obviously super passionate about this, but I love that we have more people stepping into the space of helping other women like really figure that out and getting into that embodied version of themselves where they can say no to that offer to go somewhere. They don't have to apologize. I have another episode on just that, like stop over apologizing and say thank you for waiting instead. Like it's really um it is a conscious thing where I had to like I'll set an intention like to notice notice when you say I'm sorry, so that I could
Right.
first I had to set that awareness to observe myself doing that so that I could start to modify it and I will have a prepared statement, like, okay, when
Right.
that happens, instead I'm going to say thank you for, whatever the thing is. Um, and I love seeing other women start to get tapped back into the I am, and then just seeing them like experience that light inside again. And it's amazing how all of a sudden your health changes. And I have found that the more I'm stepping into allowing myself to be seen and like having boundaries and like taking time to take care of myself and figuring out how I don't have to hustle to feel prosperity and abundance and like trying to figure out how to do business from a feminine approach has been very hard to move into because it's so different than doing business masculine where you're busy, drive, drive, drive. And so it's been this like years process now of me like figuring out like, oh no, this is actually about me seeking flow, creativity, receiving, like
So true.
learning all of that stuff, like embodying all of that, and also boundaries and speaking up for myself, and how it's opening everything up for me the more I do it. And then my health has just been so much better. I've just been slowly losing weight. Like all these things have been changing. It's like, oh my gosh, this is so cool. Like the more I step into this work, the more I feel amazing.
Well, I definitely
So
call it, it's funny, I call it the FU50s, because I literally feel like, once our hormones shift and things like that, and we're trying to move past an outdated identity. And I think it's interesting. I was talking to somebody this morning, and their husband was saying, I don't think you need to do that. I think you just need to hustle. And I said, that only works for men. I tell all my female clients, yes, a man's going to tell you to hustle because guess what? It does work for them. They're able to go contact their buddies and get the next thing. I mean, my husband, anytime he hasn't had a job, he can call his network and get a job. I call my network and I don't get anything. So hustling doesn't work for women the same way it does for men. And if it does work, great. But a lot of times you get the dribs and drabs experience of the hustle versus the full flourishment. And so you're spending a lot of energy not getting as much back. So really, what's that outdated identity that we're trying to get back to and be like, okay, F that stuff, that's not working anymore. And I think, the hormone piece definitely gives us more ability to go, F that, in a whole different way. I mean, I
yeah.
kind of feel like men deserve the, yeah, well, I'm going through menopause. And every time they give you that cringy look, you're like, you know what? 10% of men experience ED, and we know more about that blue pill than we ever need to. 100% of women alive experience menopause, so you guys can learn to suck it up.
It's amazing. I'm passionate about that too because there's like so little money invested into studying and like supporting women and their hormones and their health
Right.
and vitality after 50. But boy, did they come in there to help with some of the symptoms for men and like even like with hormone replacement therapy, there's stuff that insurance won't cover
Right.
for a woman. And it's like, what? 100% of women go through menopause, and this is a medical thing, like a week, but you're going to cover that. Okay, cool. Like, yeah, so that gets me all fired up. It just
That
drives
gets
me
me
crazy.
pretty fired up too. I'm literally like, seriously, what are you people doing? But traditional healthcare in today's society was built around the adult male.
Yeah. I I would like to hold hope for that we're seeing a research, we're seeing a surge of people talking about this topic. We're seeing it become like when I first started going through my symptoms, it's like nobody was talking about it.
Right.
It's like, oh, I think I'm in perimenopause. And it was almost like you're embarrassed. And it's like, we all of us women go through this. Why are we not talking about how to like talk, how do we not resource this with each other and talk about what it really is like going through it? So I love that it's becoming so much more of an open topic.
I do think that that has to do with the Gen X women. So I think the
Okay.
Gen X women are like, oh, the heck, I'm going to put up with that. Where, I look at like the baby boomers women and I talk to, my mom about menopause and, the forward she gave me, I was like, yeah, no, no thanks. No. And when I talk to the older generation, they're like, well, it's just something you have to deal with. And the Gen Xers are like, the heck I do. No, 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 no. So I do think the Gen X women are like, uh-uh. So I think the resurgence is because we've had enough in our lives that we're like, no, that's not going to work for me. So what else you got?
Yeah, it's true. I went and got my own lab work done, and I showed up at the doctor with my own education and said, here's my lab work, and this is what you're doing for me,
Right.
because this is what I want, and it's my body. And she's like, oh, okay. All right, let's do that. And I was like, yeah, let's.
Yeah.
So we kind of I think that I think about the next generation of ladies who are 10, 15 years behind us. I'm like, they're gonna have it so much easier. They have so many more resources. So I'm I'm glad for that, but I love that it's becoming a more mainstream topic because like we're all going through it if we
Right.
have the right chromosomes.
I'm
So
not going to
why?
not talk about it because it makes you uncomfortable. Sorry. I'm living it. You
Yeah.
think it makes you uncomfortable to talk about it? Guess what it does to me who's living it?
And you know what? That's how I've gotten resources because someone was willing to talk about it. That's how I got resources to feel better and heal myself. So that's part of why I
Yeah.
feel like what I'm wanting to do this podcast for is to like, because that's how I literally healed my health was like resources through podcasts I heard. It was not through the regular medical system
Right.
or anything. That's I found it through other people sharing what was working for them. And so I'm like, I'm going to do the same thing. So um, when you think about, I want to figure out like, let's say you've done some healing work, like you've seen some success and growth, and maybe you've got like a business and you're an entrepreneur and you've got something going, but you feel like you're just up against like a glass ceiling, like you plateau, maybe you're 2, 3 years in or something, and you're like, I don't know, like I feel like I've done work, but like things have kind of gotten stale. I'm not seeing growth that I was hoping for. Is there, what are your thoughts on that? What
So I
you
do.
would
I think
encourage
that
someone to
happens a
do?
lot, actually. I think that we're cruising along, we go through all this growth, and then we move into a pattern of, working and going through things, and then all of a sudden you're like, oh, okay, next what? Usually that's a precipice of another growth pattern, in my opinion. It's like, oh, all
Okay.
that growth you did before, yeah, you've now perfected that. And guess what? It's time for that next round of growth. And that growth is always so fun. So it is important to make sure that when you're coming up on that precipice of your next transformation, that you are working with people to help you through that transformation so that you're outgrowing, it's almost like you're outgrowing that piece of what the plant's supposed to do and you're ready for the next phase. So before you get into it, look at who was in your life. Look at who you've got relationships with. What are you looking for in this outdated piece that you're like, okay, something's, I don't know where I'm going, but I know I'm kind of done with this. I need some help figuring that out. Because you're really creating the new version of your next success. And so when you feel stuck, it's probably you're right on that precipice of that next piece. So take that stuck moment to be like, okay, who do I know that I need to reach out to and say, I'm feeling stuck and I think this means something's coming and I'd like to work on that.
Yeah, I think it's so important that we pause, notice that, and go, that's a sign. I probably need to look from, without, I need to look out for myself and like seek some guidance or help or input or find the book or whatever the thing is. Um,
For many years when I got stuck, I was like, oh, I'm stuck, I'm bored, I need to go break things.
hmm,
And so I would break things like quit a job without a job or blow up a department of, fire people. And I was like, oh, probably should have seen what was going on before I broke things and caused myself 5 times as much work fixing it. So I do think it's good to notice I'm kind of feeling this way. Before I do something, I should probably talk this through.
yeah, maybe that's kind of setting that intention within yourself to like pay attention and not let ourselves get to the point where I think figuring out earlier, like noticing the signs earlier, so you're not having to get to the boiling point or the rage point
Right.
before you're like, oh, like something's going on here, like getting quicker at noticing those first subtle signs. For me, it's like I start to have headaches, or I start to have stomach aches, or I start to have tension headaches, trouble sleeping, like, or just I'm quick to anger or
Hmm.
I'm snippy or, that's usually some good signs for me that I'm like, oh, something here needs to change or shift. What's going on? So instead of using those as cues, instead of judging it and getting mad, like going, oh, yeah, and just making a game of how much sooner before can I stop it before I'm at rage point
Yep.
and making poor decisions.
Yeah. Can I stop it before I do something that's going to be a big mess?
Yeah. I joke about um like when I first felt like things were changing in my body and things were going on and I was wanting change like that. I went from feeling like I didn't have a voice or I didn't really speak up for myself or anything to like I found my sword, like I found it. And
Oh,
so it's like my sword and I'm just like, I love doing battle with this thing. Like I want to whip it up every chance I get, right? And and then learning how to actually use it and when to use it and like now I just want people to know I have it and I know how to use it, and you probably don't want me to take that out. I want you to sense that from me and try to just don't push me to need that because you're gonna pay the price if I take that out.
that's
So
awesome. I just
I
see you as a
really,
big battler with your sword. Now your sword is like, it's very sharp, it's very edgy. You know exactly when to use it. It's with
yes.
surgical precision. Let's go.
Oh yeah. It's funny because I'm pointing over here because when we helped my dad move out of his house, um, I actually found like a sword that has like the sheath somewhere in his house, and I was like, "What? When did you ever have this?" And so it's right in the corner right here, and I'm like,
Nice.
"I'm gonna put it up someday." But to me, it's like that reminder of like I can take it out if I need to, but I don't
Yes, you
need to.
can.
I don't have to have it out all the time. Oh, so I was just wanting to, we'll tie things up here. I just was curious, like, what do you feel like some of the gifts are that you've received from working with the clients around this kind of work?
Oh, wow. So, really witnessing women remember who they are and really being able to support them in their empowerment journey. Helping people with trauma learn to walk with it instead of being very focused on getting rid of it, because that's kind of a battle that you're not going to win. So really embracing it in a way as it's going to walk with you. So that really fills me up, breaking generational cycles. But I also like to consider myself a laser coach. So I go fast in my disruption. And so one of the gifts is seeing the change happen really quickly. My clients and people, they're generally surprised at the amount of transformation that can happen quickly because I push on that disruptive piece.
You know what? I love that you talked about this because I think there's this perception out there that when you are going to step into working on or starting to make friends with your trauma
Mhm.
and not tell them to shut up anymore or go away, like that, I feel there's a concept out there that like it's going to be hard work, it's going to take forever, like you really have to spend all this time digging into the past and dragging it all back up and looking at it. And I think there's more ways to reach healing. And I went to, and I know there are lots of times where it is needed to go to a licensed person, so I'm not encouraging people not to go that route. We need to do what's right for us. I tried the traditional route and I found myself going right back to working with a coach because I was expecting, like, I had gotten used to like them like calling me out and going, here it is. Like, really being to that point, like really pushing me forward. So then when I met with a therapist, I was like, we got the phone. I was like, we didn't even talk about anything. I didn't get any solutions or answers or guidance or homework or anything. And I was so frustrated. But I realized that like through working with lots of other coaches and programs that like healing and change can happen really fast. And when you hear other people's stories of how fast you can make shift and change in your life, and sometimes surprisingly, it comes to finding pleasure and play and joy in your life,
It
which I
does.
think people don't realize that that's actually also a healing tool. And that curiosity to figure out what you like to do to play and have pleasure, it doesn't all have to be hard work. It doesn't all have to be painful. There is another path to healing. So I love that you're talking about like, doesn't have to be a 10-year program, and that we're using our intuitive gifts to step into that is beautiful. I love that you're doing this work. It's
I
so
usually work
awesome.
myself out of a job. My goal is to help people, and so then I'm working myself out of a job because
Yeah.
after we get to a certain point, they're like, "Okay, don't need you anymore," and you're like, "Yeah, you really don't. Oh, great, bye." um,
Well, that means you're really good at what you do.
it is true. I work myself out of a job a lot, but I also think that therapy and coaching are different. Coaching is more action
Mhm,
focused, and therapy is a little more internal work,
mhm,
peeling back the layers, and it's not meant to be fast. So that's why I've literally been pairing them and doing both for over 20
mhm.
years. And,
Yeah.
my therapists and coaches know I do both. And so, and there's time, I don't do weekly therapy anymore. I don't need to. I mean, it has been 37 years, but I think that understanding what you get out of them and how to maximize the two pieces. And
Mhm.
sometimes I need therapy, sometimes I need coaching, sometimes I need both. So it is understanding what you're going to get, where you're going to go, because I can say if you go into coaching and ignore the therapy piece and think, oh, this person's going to solve my problems, no, you still got to do work. But sometimes if you're doing it well, you can work much faster.
That's true. That is true. And I think there have been times in my life in the past that it has been something that I've needed, to have that therapist and have that space to be heard and seen from that neutral party that knows what they're doing. It was needed at the time as well. So I think it's beautiful that we have so many resources here right now and can give ourselves permission to seek what feels right for ourselves. Is so beautiful. I ask all of my guests this question. It's my favorite question. What is your personal definition of joy?
My personal definition of joy would be um, radical aliveness and really fully occupying your body, your voice, your energy, your sense of enthusiasm. For me, joy shows up as enthusiasm when I'm enthusiastic about something. And I think for me in my practice is it's not asking permission anymore. I'm not really good at the permission person, but helping my clients understand that they don't need permission. So the joy comes from that 100% of embodiment of aliveness and the radicalness of being fully alive.
Amen. I love how different everybody's answer is every time. They're always vastly different, which I find super fascinating. Okay, so I want you to tell people like that are listening if they're wanting to either work with you or they want to learn more about this kind of work or resources around CSA trauma or any trauma, or even like maybe wanting to see growth in their business or career or
Mhm.
just in being a leader in their community or in their family. What would you recommend as resources?
So some of the things that I offer, I mean, if someone goes to my website, which is www.spark-alchemy.com, so it's SPARK-ALCHEMY.com, there is
And
a
I'll put
free
that in the
lead
show
weight.
notes.
Yep, there is a free lead weight assessment. So you
Okay.
can take this lead weight assessment, and this will tell you kind of where you are in the trauma and how you're dealing with things. And are they holding you back? Are there things you could be doing differently? Could you be moving forward? Some of the programs I offer is I have an 8-week Radiance Mastermind that I have several layers of. One is the first one is always the I am, and that's where we really start learning about that. I do offer one-on-one coaching if people would rather go deeper than the mastermind, although the mastermind's more group coaching versus individual coaching. I'm getting ready to do a free webinar on the 13th, which talks about alchemizing the trauma, even if you had therapy. How do you figure out how to move forward and work? And then I'm going to have a workshop on the self care revolution July 8th. So that's something else that's coming. That will be on my website in the next 2 weeks. I'm working on designing that now. Check me out on LinkedIn, Rhonda Skallan. I am the only Rhonda Skallan, Skallan, in the United States. So if you spell my name right, you will find me. You will find me on LinkedIn. You'll find me on pretty much any social media platform that I'm on just by having my name.
And it's Rhonda with an H.
Rhonda with an H, definitely. And other things, if you know, there is RAIN, which is the rape. Let me see if I can get the letters right. Rape, Abuse, and Incest National Network, RAINN. That's a place you can go for resources and look into that. Um, if anyone needs something around dealing with sexual abuse, whether it be rape or incest. And yeah, reach out. I also have a podcast, and it's I have not updated my podcast in last year, but there's some cute little tidbits. They're about 5 minutes, quick listens to, um, and yeah, that's
Okay.
who I am. Feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn, direct message me, Facebook, and my website.
Okay. I is there, do you have Instagram too, or is it just Facebook?
I am on
Or-
Instagram, but usually it's through my Facebook. But you can find me on Instagram,
Okay.
Rhonda
Okay.
Skallan. Mhm.
Okay.
I'm working
Perfect.
on my business pages for Facebook and Instagram because I'm like, okay, I guess I'm gonna need to do more business pages. But since I am me, and I do find that Rhonda Skallan is how you can find
Yeah,
me most of the
easy
time.
way for people to find you. Well, I appreciate you coming in and sharing about trauma and resources and the healing that's possible. And I love that you took time to describe what it looks like when women do healing and start to rise into themselves and embrace the I am that they are and their wholeness. It's beautiful work. And I thank you for doing that work for women. I'm passionate about it as well. So I love that you're doing it and helping women. So I hope that if anybody listening needs any of these resources, just know I'll have everything in the show notes so that you can reach out and connect with Rhonda and her powerful resources and gifts. So yeah, thank you for
Thank you
joining
so
me
much. This has
today.
been such a pleasure.
Yeah.
I really have enjoyed learning more about you, Erica, and it was so great to meet you when we were at the women's retreat, and so great to learn so much about just women and how to be together. I always think that I would like to do a Sunday women's group and call it church, just so that women can connect again. Because I think one of the things we're missing is just the tribe of connection.
Yeah, and we do a manifesting call each week,
Yes.
and it's online. But I have realized how much each of us are wanting that connection, and how powerful it is when a group come together with this joined same intention. How much can happen for people, and so there is power in connecting with our tribe. I think we're coming into a time where we're all going to be really connecting, and looking to find our tribe, of people that you feel like you can be completely unfiltered with and just be
Yes.
yourself. And that's, I think that retreat served as a space to taste what that really looked like for the first time in my entire adult life. And I left that retreat utterly changed. It's the Wise Women's Retreat, Revival Retreat. It was amazing. And it changed my life for sure, because I had just not experienced that with other women before. And yeah, it will forever, uh, I can't speak to that retreat enough either.
I agree. I agree. That
It
was my
was so
second
beautiful.
time attending, and it
Yeah.
was
Uh,
quite powerful both
yeah,
times.
I think they're going to start back. I think they're this
There's
week is
one,
the
I
next
think there's
one.
one this week, and then
Yeah.
they're actually going to be doing one in November in Colorado, which is where I'm
Oh,
at. Hmm.
oh, yeah. So if people are interested, we'll put that in the show notes too, because that was life changing. I think the more times we can offer that space. So I hope you do create a space and call it church where you are, because I think we all are starting to offer that and
Yeah,
realize how powerful it is.
definitely.
So,
So,
yeah.
all right.
Well, I will look forward to seeing you soon, and I'll probably have you back on because I'll be curious about more stuff. So,
That's great. That's great. Look
yeah,
forward to it. Thanks so much,
yeah.
Erica.
All right. Thank you.